And we're live.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us once again from the backup office, which is my back porch in lovely Roswell, Georgia. I am your host, excuse me, of the weekly Cult of Copy show. My name is, as you can see below, the Reverend Dr. Sir Colin D. Terrio, Pontifex Maximus of a secretive worldwide organization known as the Cult of Copy. That's just a fancy way of saying we have a popular internet discussion group on the subject of persuasion and influence for purposes of marketing. You can join us if you're interested in that kind of thing at cultofcopy.com. At the time of this recording, that URL should point you directly to the group. If this is at some future point and it doesn't do that, it will at least take you to our webpage where you can join the group if you want to. That's something I am starting as a project right now, so who knows? That'll be cool when it works out. This show is, as I said, the Cult of Copy show, but it is available not only to cult members, but all non-cult members, future cult members, and anti-cult members that may happen to want to tune in. Currently, it is recorded live via Google Hangout Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. If that's something you want to join us live for recording, you can do so at youtube.com/cultofcopy, which is our channel. And in the threateningly near future, I've said that every episode so far, and we're at episode 9, but in the very near future, we will also be on iTunes and Stitcher, I think it's called, on Android for audio versions of this show. But hopefully, well, you know, if it's any time near the recording of this, you are watching it in a video version. So thanks for joining us, as always. We are also accompanied by Zane Miller, who is our show's director. And were it not for Zane, I would not know about any of this wonderful technology that has me talking to you today. So I'm going to give Zane a second to tell you what he does and how to work more with him if that's the kind of thing you're interested in. Take it away, Zane.
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute my mic there. So, hello everybody. I'm glad that I'm looking more familiar. Colin? Do you like my fro? I'm
Yeah, it's nice, man.
trying to do something a
Nice.
little bit different.
Actually, somebody PM'd me the other week when I did the show without a hat on,
Yeah.
and he said he thought I was bald because he had only ever seen me with a hat on. And I suppose that's true. I could see why somebody might think that, but no, I have quite a shaggy hair. My wife is like, as some of you may know, I'm about to have a kid, and my wife is really bugging me to get a haircut before that happens because, like, in the hospital, they send the photographer around to take, like, super fresh baby pictures.
Oh.
And, like, so I need a haircut, but the beard is fine. Anyways, I digress. I'm sorry, Zane, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, dude. That actually you gave me a moment to pull up what I wanted to show
Oh,
on
cool.
my screen here. So just so that you know, of course, you guys have seen me a couple times, but I do have my own little community for those of you who are interested in hearing all about how Google Plus works, Hangouts, all that other kind of stuff. You're seeing it happen in real time right now. But if you're interested in seeing how it works and how you could do it, or how you could work with people, again, many of the people who are watching this are copywriters. So I believe in the future, copywriters will be working very much in tune with Hangout people and stuff like that. So it's a great community, and again, I thank you, Colin, because you've driven a lot of people there, and
Awesome.
that's it. Thank you, man.
Awesome. No worries. Um, so that's Zane, our director. I think I hit my little checklist of everything that I have. Oh, and by the way, some people have actually asked, like, how do you structure the show? I don't know if you can see that. There's my, I just do a little mind map, and it's like most of it repeats week by week, and then this week's subject is just sort of worked in there, and I just sort of break it down to the point where I feel like I can ramble on about that subject for a couple of minutes at a time until I know the whole hour is full. It worked the last time I used to do my show before my long hiatus, and it's working for this show. If you like it, no one said they haven't, so it works for me. Um, like we've been doing the last couple of weeks, I sort of wanted to do a little segment here to talk about, you know, just general things that have happened in my business, or advertising or media things that have sort of caught my interest, and really, I sort of have been out of the loop because, like you may have noticed, normally I promote this show much, much earlier in the week. And this week I haven't been able to just because my second son was due actually June 1st. And we're sort of waiting for him to pop out when he feels like it. That's cool. You know, he's got some time. He can take a little while. But it's sort of one of those things where, you know, staying close to home, ready to go at a moment's notice, haven't really been doing a whole lot of work. So I don't really have any sort of cool media thing that I noticed or something that kind of stuck in my head this week, but I wanted to still leave that portion of the show here to encourage you, our viewing audience, to pass those sort of things on, even if you're not a member of the Cult of Copy itself, even if you're not that deeply interested in it. If you leave a comment anywhere that is associated with the show, I will get it, and I would love suggestions for those kind of things, just to get fuel and content for the show, because I love looking at those things, and if I'm going to bother getting on a weekly show and talk at a big bunch of people, like, you guys can start doing some of my work for me and send in the kind of things that you would like to discuss and talk about and ask questions about. And of course, any questions that you may want to ask about previous episodes or anything like that, any of the methods by which you are watching this show, Google+, YouTube, even if you're squatting on the Facebook post about this and the Cult of Copy, if you want to leave a comment, something you want to talk about, or a question, could be previous show content, could be anything. I'm going to check in with Zane now and then. He can interrupt me when something pertinent pops up, but this is meant to be an interactive show, so send on suggestions for things for future episodes, or even just interact with us live while we're recording it. That's cool too. That's the whole point of doing it live via Hangout. The next thing I would normally talk about at this point in the show, if I had had a much longer discussion period, this would be a little later in the show, but it would be an advertising spot. I'm not currently advertising anything, but if you like this show and the content, and you feel like our audience is an audience you would like to reach out to, these advertising spots will be available. Just get in touch if you're interested. The show's audience only grows and grows, and like I said, we're branching out into multiple outlets in the near future. If you record an ad in an episode, it will be in that episode forever. And I'm lazy and I like to take advantage of assets I've already made, so I promise you I will be permanently endorsing and encouraging people to look at these old episodes. So if you have something evergreen that you would like to promote, it's a good idea to even, you know, get into an episode and get benefit forever into the future from it. So if that's something you're interested in, get in touch. I'll talk about it a couple of more times in the episode, so you, as maybe a potential future advertiser, might know, hey, he could stop his show and talk about my stuff at this spot and get his huge audience of geniuses to be interested in my products. And I would, because I'm a shill. This week, as you may have seen from the post that I did only today to tell you what this week's episode was going to be about, is something that's been on my mind because I'm actually writing the current issue of the Cult of Copy newsletter around the topic of specifically indoctrination. Indoctrination, most people know the word, and I love it because it's got this kind of sinister quality to it. Like, no one here is like, oh, indoctrination, that's a good thing. It's just got this, it's like propaganda, you know what I mean? The second you hear that word, it sounds a little negative, a little harsh, a little weird. And the deal with indoctrination, all indoctrination is teaching where your audience of students have no skepticism or questioning or anything like that. They just accept it as if you are regurgitating obvious, apparent, and totally true facts about the universe, basically. As you can imagine, as a marketer, to get people to buy things, the ability to indoctrinate others with particular pieces of information about your product, about the benefits of it, about the status it may provide, things like that. If you could be able to deliver that information to your audience in such a way where there is no skepticism, they just accept it, it just pours right into their mind as if it's a part true and demonstrable part of reality, and they just accept it and internalize it. And in the future, if they make decisions upon it, in their mind, it doesn't feel like something someone told them. It just feels like a thing that exists and that they believe in. For example, if you sold a particular brand of soda and you wanted to deliver to your audience the idea that a certain kind of people, perhaps young, sexy people, drink this kind of soda, while as the other soda is for old fogies and fat asses or whatever. If you could implant that into their head by way of indoctrination, where they would internalize it and accept that is the case, then later on, when they decide, hey, I am a young, hip, cool person, I'm going to buy this soda instead of the other one because this one is for young people. If you indoctrinate it, they will feel like that was their, like they made that conclusion. It was self-apparent versus, hey, I remember from the commercial, this was what was suggested to me by advertisers who are paid by the manufacturers of this soda. Maybe I will see if their recommendation is correct. That's not really how people's minds work. When you can indoctrinate people with that information, it's a lot better. And one of the tricks, as I mentioned, soda commercials specifically are very good at, like, the commercial is never about, oh, this soda tastes really good and is refreshing. You know what I mean? Like, they might show people drinking it, but it's much more focused on who is the kind of person drinking that particular soda, rather than talking about the benefits of their particular brand of, you know, caramel taste and sugar water or whatever, fizzy or not, you know. But that's one of the tricks of indoctrination. So that's the idea with indoctrination. The other thing we're going to talk about today in a reverse order, we'll actually talk about this other one first, is induction. And the idea with inducting someone is that you create a sort of subgroup within the larger full reach of your audience. For example, when you are watching this video, you may not already be a member of the Cult of Copy discussion group. I would like for you to be. That is a group that this show will induct you into. You don't have to, but if you like this kind of stuff, we talk about it there all the time, and there are cool things you can read and chat with people about, and there are a bunch of interesting characters and personalities and really smart people if you have questions about this kind of thing in, say, your marketing. That is a group that I can induct you into, that from inside that group, the indoctrination stuff we just talked about is much, much easier. Unlike most avenues that use this sort of interaction between induction and indoctrination, I'm a lot more honest about it because, you know, that's kind of my whole thing. Yes, I am bringing you into my group where I happen to have things for sale. They're good things, but like that's, like I made a cool group so you would go there and want to hang out. And then also, by the way, while you're enjoying this show, there are commercials because that's how we pay the bills. Zane's raising his hand.
Well, I'm still toying with, like, you know, how exactly do I interrupt Colin? Do I just go, hey, Colin, shut up, I got something to say?
Nice.
I figured a little wave might help, but
It does.
I was actually working on this specific to your channel. I think an example of the induction is what I've been doing with some of these hangouts and cutting them up into smaller pieces so that somebody who is not familiar with the channel or the group, when they wander in through YouTube, they're actually introduced to a smaller version of the bigger hangout, and so they get like just a little snippet, and then there's a call to action at the end. Click here to watch the full episode.
No, that's very true. It's almost like creating concentric rings that you're casting wider and wider, really. Because really, induction is just doing it once where you're pulling people into a tighter, more specific group. And we'll talk about this in more detail in a minute, about how to create that perception even when it's not like an actual induction happening. They're not actually changing categories, but it feels like they are because you're talking to them like they are. But I digress. When you do this in multiple layers, like you can really think of if anyone sells a product that has like 3 tiers of service, instead of thinking of them as like layers, think of it as like concentric circles, right? The more you pay, the tighter the circle gets and the closer you get to the people you actually bought from, the more you can interact with them. Just the same way as my business is set up, where you're watching this show free, and there's some measure of interaction while it is literally happening right now and week to week. But if you're my client and pay me a bunch of money, you can call me on the phone and we'll talk anytime you want to, considering you pay me enough. But that's like a layering. My business is set up around those layers, and the more you get inducted, the closer in you come. I'm set up so that that pays more, because what you get more of from me is my time, and that's really the thing that's most valuable from me. So the more of it you want, the more it's going to cost, because like I love you and I want to help you do whatever you want to do, but I would also much rather be playing video games. So we gotta weigh that out, you know. But that's induction, this idea that if you want to indoctrinate people, it's much easier if you induct them first into a more specific, more tight, more focused community that they can feel that they belong to in some capacity. And then from inside that community, a lot more indoctrination can happen. You can literally saturate people with it, like not even on purpose. It just happens as part of internet communities. It's a natural feature of what happens when a whole bunch of people get together and gather around a common interest and create and share content about that common interest with each other. Indoctrination is heavy in those communities, and you can see it everywhere. Like even like a comment thread on like a news story on a major news outlet of whichever political spin you may enjoy. If you live in the US, you got like two choices basically. But you go in there and you look, and you can almost see the dividing lines in the comments between the two sides. And it's really interesting to see people have been inducted into these circles and indoctrinated in certain ways, and they repeat points and counterpoints back to each other. And what's weird is that the way I consume, especially news media, just because I find it to be kind of a drag, so I'll like neglect news and read like one news website a day just to kind of make sure I don't miss anything crazy that I should know about. And then like once a month, I'll like watch a 24-hour news network for a little while and kind of catch up, because they're repeating everything over and over. You watch it on like a Saturday once a month, you'll catch up pretty much within like 1 hour. You'll know everything you need to know. But this these media outlets sort of indoctrinate people by inducting them into this little circle of exclusive information. Like, we're the only one who's going to tell it to you how it really is. So if whatever it is that they tell you resonates with like your personal values or things you're suspicious of, you'll sort of accept their version of what's happening as if it's the actual news, because that's the effect of indoctrination. You trust them as a source. So when you're listening to what they're telling you, you just internalize it rather than thinking, well, is this like a major news corporation who's beholden to its advertisers and its multi-billionaire owners who are also heavy political contributors to both sides of the fence? So really, they're paying to create their own news media content, which they can then use to sell advertising. Is that what's happening? No, you don't think of any of that. You're like, I like what that guy's saying. I agree with everything he has going on. Hold on, my phone's ringing. No, Mom. Hold on. I'm doing my show right now. Hi. That was my mom, you guys. Because of the baby, she's like calling a lot. This is going to be funny. I'm going to tell her about this later, that she's on my show.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so real life interrupting. Let's jump in. Where were we? Okay, so in general, this idea with indoctrination and induction working in tandem is in internet marketing, this thing sort of happens automatically in organic communities. But being that it's happening automatically, organically on the internet being what it is, just a system of computers, you can artificially jumpstart this effect, right? This interplay between inducting people into a group and then letting that group start indoctrinating them with certain kinds of information. You see this a lot. It sort of happens backwards in like mass media properties that sort of dip into social media, where they're like, you know, tweet about this or go to our website and discuss it in the comments. And it's, you know, you see that on some TV show or whatever. What I've done with the cult of copy and what's possible for anybody doing anything online is to really sort of approach that backwards, where you create the community first and then start creating the content to feed the demands of the community. So like, I didn't start the cult of copy show and then build a community off of that. We built a community first so that when I started the show, it would have an audience built in, which is really a unique form of media marketing that's only possible on the internet, because you can't start a community on any other type of media property, only on the internet. So that's one of these things why I think this matters. And really, this idea of community building is one that I'm most interested in marketing, even though I started my career and I have much more of a reputation as like a persuasive copywriter, like writing sales material. These ideas of social self-marketing, where people collect into groups and just talk to each other all day about things that they love and want to buy, that idea that the companies that make those things that they will be talking about are the ones creating the communities for them to hang out, is one that I'm fascinated by. And a parallel to that would be, like when I was growing up, I think we're around the same age, right, Zane? Like, what were your favorite cartoons growing up?
Oh yeah, the classics. I'm about 5 years younger than you, but
Okay.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Okay.
You know, Voltron. That's another one.
Right.
The classics. I don't know. Like I say, the 1990s classics.
Right. Well, what's funny about the two that you named in particular is Voltron was around when I was a kid. The ones that were really huge when I was young were G.I. Joe and Transformers and He-Man.
There we go.
And anyone that's roughly my age, mid-30s, is going to remember these early 80s cartoons with great fondness. These cartoons were produced by toy companies who already had the toys to sell. And instead of making commercials, they made cartoons for the kids to watch.
Yep.
Great demand for the toys. So in that way, you can almost look at that like they were creating the fan community pre-internet, creating this fan community by playing these cartoons that kids would watch after school every day. And then the toy commercials were in the cartoon, and then the toys were already in the stores waiting for you to buy the next time you went in with your parents. That is really, really powerful kind of marketing. And I talk about toys specifically here because that is one of the features, one of the main features of indoctrination. If you're a newsletter subscriber in the Cult of Copy, that's one of the main points in the article that I'm still writing, is getting people while they're young is very, very easy to indoctrinate because they have not developed sufficient filters of skepticism. Now, that sounds insidious when you think I'm talking strictly about children, which I was when I was talking about toys. But when we are talking about someone just being young in a particular niche, right? They're not very sophisticated. They don't know their way around. They don't know that there are some negative things at all having to do with the niche. It's just something they're interested in on a very surface level. They haven't dug very deep. They're very naive about it. They are very ripe for indoctrination in the same way that, you know, children are in general, because they don't know what to be skeptical of yet. They may have like a general kind of skepticism, but it's not going to be very focused. It's not going to be very specified, which is why, for example, even seemingly intelligent, successful people sometimes get suckered into these like Nigerian email scams that any kid that grew up on the internet knows are total bullshit because they look like bullshit. You're like, yeah, right, you're a prince from Nigeria, I get it, whatever. Because by that point, like, someone hip to the internet has gotten millions of spam messages. They know what they look like. Meanwhile, your newly retired grandpa who ran a successful like dry cleaning business and has no internet experience is now learning about the Facebooks and the emails finally, now that he's not washing people's clothes all day. And he's like, what? I won a Spanish lottery? I don't even remember entering a Spanish lottery. How did that happen? Because they don't know. They're not sophisticated enough. They weren't ever plugged into it. That's what I mean about indoctrination being useful and possible on the young, quote unquote, not necessarily young in age, but young in whatever environment, and then within that environment, whatever little pocket niche you're focusing on. They just aren't sophisticated enough to be critical, basically.
Yeah, so not just kids, but also like I see, especially in the internet marketing world, like the newbies, right? The people who are just getting in and they're just learning, and I think people like you and I are just like, oh, I really hope you don't get burned. Like I'm rooting for you. Stay the track and do the right things, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where people are enticing their unsophisticated customers off of what they are portraying as a hamster wheel, but what they are actually offering is just a different kind of hamster wheel of marketing or whatever. Buy this, no, buy this, no, buy this other thing. But they're tapping into that, again, indoctrinated consumer conditioning that we all have, which is buy something disposable and finite, use it up, wear it out, buy a new one, buy two, it's cheaper, that kind of thing. That whole consumer culture that if you want to blow your mind, go watch this documentary called Century of the Self about a guy named Edward Bernays, who was Sigmund Freud's American nephew. He was a propaganda pioneer during World War I. In fact, he wrote the book on propaganda, which I know is a turn of phrase saying somebody wrote the book on. He literally wrote the book called Propaganda by Edward Bernays. When World War I was over, he wanted to come back to America and continue his work in propaganda, but propaganda had gotten a bad reputation. So weird. We talked about that at the beginning of the hour. Didn't even intend to talk about this, but it circles back around. Anyway, he wanted to continue to use propaganda and have businesses as his clients instead of countries. But propaganda had gotten like a bad connotation because by that point Germany had gotten a hold of what he was doing and started doing it themselves. So what he did was he renamed the concept of propaganda for business as public relations, which in and of itself is literally the first act of public relations, which is taking something that sounds bad and just changing it. Like, what's that mercenary company that was like doing real bad shit at the Gulf War, Blackwater?
Oh yeah, I
They
think
changed
so.
their name to like X something. Like they're still around. They just changed their name, so you never hear about, oh, Blackwater, those guys are jerks. They just changed their name. It's like X something now, XM, X2, something like that.
They got the same thing happening about 10 years ago in Utah. There was a place called Heritage Web Design, and it was like, hey, $200 for a website, and where they hooked you was with the hosting. And so you'd start paying for hosting, and since there was such a huge volume of people buying, that they needed to reach out to all these different outsourcing companies, of which I was a part of one of them, and it was bad all the way around. The customers hated them, the outsourcers hated them, like everybody hated them,
Right.
And so they changed their name from Heritage Web Design to HIT, which was basically still the same company, but they're like, well, we're just going to change a few things.
Right.
They're still too lazy to like fully change the name.
Right, and it worked, at least for a little while.
Yeah, a little while.
That's one of the things where people are like, I don't really see the value in branding. The snake shedding its skin method is one of the things that everyone should consider strong branding, even though you don't think you need it. It's a lot easier to shake off a bad reputation, whether you earned it or not, because sometimes you get a bad reputation you didn't earn. It's a lot easier to change gears and slough that skin if you have a strong brand in the first place, because then you just do a different one, and people remember that the other company was bad because it had such a good brand recognition. But I digress. Back on the path of talking about this online shift, this this interactive, this social kind of marketing where people are putting themselves naturally into tribes and herds all by themselves is very valuable to the kind of person who is a solo business operator, a small business operator looking to grow, especially if you're building a business around like your personal brand. If you're an expert in something and that's sort of how you're building your reputation, these ideas of induction and indoctrination are going to be a lot more valuable to you than big company typical advertising concepts, right? Rather than broadcasting a message out, you can build a community around what it is you want to talk about, and then you basically own your own channel and own all the advertising opportunities inside that channel, which you can use exclusively for yourself or for other people if you want to. But that's literally how TV networks work, right? They create shows, and they hope the shows are good, and a lot of people watch them, because then they can sell those spots to advertisers for a lot of money, and that's how the network gets paid. It's a trade. The viewer gets the show for free in exchange for already being sitting there to have advertising thrown in your face, and people sometimes buy that stuff, and that's what the network is selling. But what I'm telling you is basically the internet provides opportunities for you to create those same kind of audiences where you are the network and you are the advertiser.
That's actually
Dave's raising his hand.
That's actually exactly how the YouTube Partner Program works. Is that you push out all this content, and then YouTube says, "Yeah, we'll put advertisements on there," and depending on how popular you are, that you like there's thousands, tens of thousands of people who make six figures a year just on the advertisement on their YouTube channel.
Right, and that's YouTube handling it directly. Like, I'm less inclined to do that. I'm more the kind of person to put my own advertisements in my own content.
Yeah, for sure.
But the only reason I can do that is because I spent the time building up my community first, right? I already have an audience. Yep. So like from day one of my show, I got like 300 viewers on the first episode because I already have my own audience. That's the power of having your own audience, is that like immediately you have enough people watching to make it worth advertising your own product's time and your advertisers' products if you choose to take them on. That being said, that's sort of one of the unique positions that I think the internet can give marketers that quote-unquote old-school copywriters don't really think of or talk about. They're focused on sales letters and email autoresponder sequences and these things that are basically just the internet version of very, very old direct mail marketing techniques, which is fine. They make a ton of money. Do those. By all means, do those. But this induction and indoctrination stuff is something sort of new. It's not completely new, but there are a lot more opportunities to reinforce and make it much more interactive than were in the past. So like in the 70s, sure, you could have an inner circle comprised of like a print newsletter, but the opportunities for interaction had a lot of drag, because like somebody had to write to you and mail it, and you had to read it and then publish your response in a future issue if you even did that kind of thing. Whereas now you can publish a newsletter and have like a living, thriving community chit-chatting back and forth live in real time about whatever it is that you're talking about. In fact, the newsletter for the Cult of Copy primarily hinges on the content of links to older conversations in the community. So instead of creating a newsletter and then hoping a community built around it, I built the community first, and the newsletter is just a chronicle of the things that we talk about in the community. I had a built-in audience who wanted to buy the newsletter because, again, capitalizing on this idea of the induction and the indoctrination happening as part of a community, building that first, and then doing your business inside of that community.
Yeah, so, in fact, I've even told you, I've done these types of shows quite a few times, and yours, by far, has always got the most interaction, the most amount of shares, the most amount of subscribers. So the list goes on, and
nice.
to which your response has always been, well, that's what happens when you start with an audience, right?
Right. I mean, somebody, I'm not going to name them because I'm going to disagree with them publicly in just a minute, but someone I respect very much. We agree on a lot of things. But his opinion was that the show at an hour a week was too long, that people in my niche wanted shorter content. And to which I say some of them probably do, but my favorite podcasts are at least an hour a week. Like, I really like Joe Rogan's podcast. That dude does like 3 hours a day. Sean Hannity on his radio show, he does 3 hours a day. And they got like crazy rabid audiences. So whatever people there are out there in the internet that are interested in this topic, that's who I want as part of the audience of this show. I want the person who's going to give me an hour a week and be like, why isn't there more of this? Because that's how I am as a member of this niche. So to me, because of the small scale that I am, I feel like I can build a more reasonable business rather than casting a wide net and having many low-priced products for a slightly interested audience. I do better making more premium, deep products for the people who are addicts of this kind of information, and that's the community that I want to build around. So that's another feature too. And people who are that interested are easy to indoctrinate, and they want to be inducted because they've been looking for something like this desperately, because they have a Jones that no one is satisfying, right? No one's going deep enough for them. So if you can be the person who's creating the community that's like, you know, like a 5-minute video every 3 months is not enough for you. You need like an hour a week at least, and you're going to show up every time, and the ones that you miss, you're going to record and listen to later. In fact, you might even just watch old episodes for the hell of it. Wink, wink. But that it's just a different concept, I think, than most people who have come into this like do-it-yourself marketing community have seen. Because yes, when you're buying a list of actual physical addresses and paying for stamps to send to them, you are just playing a different game, and the internet works so much differently than that. So let's look at these two ideas now that we're halfway through the show, by the way. This is where a commercial would go if we were pausing for that kind of thing. So instead, what I'm going to do is, if anyone watching wants to get a mention on the show and you send me a new hat, then I might wear the hat on the show, and then I'll mention you, right? This one's from Daredevil Marketing. I have the only gray one, except for one other one that apparently is messed up. But whatever. That's just a story. That's fine. Also, we'll mention this beer. If anyone runs a brewery or just wants me to mention a different beer on camera, this is from Green Flash Brewing Company. Fine handcrafted ales of San Diego, California. This is their West Coast IPA. And I really like IPAs in general, but this one is especially good for the summertime because it's not very heavy. Doesn't feel very like, I know this is a visual word and not like a taste word, but a lot of IPAs feel very opaque. They feel thick. This is very light and summery. Like you can see through it and stuff. It's nice. It's good for a hot day. So West Coast IPA from Green Flash Brewing Company. If you want me to talk about your beer in front of my audience, send me some beer. For details on where to send it, you should like PM me and stuff, because I'm not going to say it on the show because I'll probably get a PO box for that kind of thing.
And I'll also say, every time that I've mentioned my group or my show or whatever I do, I always get notifications and I always get people hitting me up. So even in these early stages, I'm still getting a lot of benefit from being mentioned in the show. So guys, scoop up this opportunity before Colin starts, doing other stuff.
I don't want to stress too much that the only people watching this show are people that were already in my audience, because the group, the Cult of Copy, has grown by 1,000 members a month since I started doing the show. So the show itself is getting seen by plenty of people that don't already know about me. And it's got to be at least, I'm not measuring it, so it's at least in part because of the show, because I do no other advertising. It has to be. Moving on, we're going to talk about the two topics individually, induction and indoctrination, which is where my mind map comes in. I took notes at lunch, you guys, because I'm a professional. Induction. So we talked about how that's this idea of bringing them in, and we talked a little lopsidedly about this idea of online communities. So I run a discussion group. I'm a little biased. Most other marketers that are probably listening to this may not want to run a group. In fact, I run a group where I teach people how to build groups the way that I did, And one of the questions that came up is like, how much time do you dedicate to this group? And I'm like, I don't know, but probably a lot, because the point of it is I was wasting time on this, so then I built a community around it and then built my business inside that community. So it's the kind of thing that doesn't feel like work because I was spending all my time doing it anyway because it's a passionate interest of mine. That's how groups are. But we mentioned just a second ago how like the old school way of doing this in a pre-internet age would have been to have a newsletter. Now, many marketers, even like your low-end affiliate type marketers, build email lists. But almost none of them use that concept of a newsletter to create that sensation of being in an inner circle. They give away a freebie, they slap people on the list. A lot of times they don't even let them know, hey, I'm gonna like be sending you future emails. Now, for me, like we talked about, like being sophisticated as being part of this community, I know the only reason you're asking me for my email address in the first place is because, duh, you're gonna email me something. Some people don't get that. They're like, I just wanted this free ebook. I gave you my name and email, and how dare you email me? It's like, well, what did you think you wanted it for? You know, like he could have just given it to you without the email address. He didn't have to email it to you, Grandpa. You can download PDFs right off the internet. No big. But I digress. Even just an email list, if you create that proper context where you say it's something like a newsletter, an inner circle, something that is not just, hey, I'm giving you my email address to get this one free thing that you're offering as a bribe and I'm not interested in further communication. Instead, you offer them the opportunity to join a collective, a list of people who are dedicated to this subject in a deep and meaningful way, and that you're feeding them not just like with the eyedropper, but with the fire hose. You don't necessarily have to gauge it like that if you can't keep up with that amount of content. But even if you're just going to email them occasionally, it's much more beneficial to set that context up front as that you're coming into part of a community or a subscriber to something of value. That should be part of any squeeze page rather than just the freebie. You need to mention the fact that, hey, I'm putting you on a list, but make that a benefit, make it a feature, make that a reason why you're asking for their email. It's not something to hide. It's something to put front and center that, hey, this is like, you're going to get some exclusive insider stuff that is not published to the rest of the web, but we're going to send it straight to you. And that sounds special, but of course you're going to send it straight to them. That's why you ask for their email address. But it sounds special, and that's what's important. So even in lists, you can do this. But the trick that's very important for email lists that didn't used to be the case back in the day when we were talking about newsletters is the feedback loop. And we talked about that a little bit before, where in a print newsletter, they had to write a letter, mail it in. You had to get it, read it, write a response, and then publish it in like maybe 5 issues past when they wrote in. So even if you look at old magazines or old comic books, I used to be a comic book collector, and I used to love reading the letters pages. You'd read the letters, and in that particular issue, they're talking about like 3 issues back what happened, just because that was the lag time to get these things set up so that they could be published. We don't have that on the internet, so you can create these immediate feedback loops. And I don't think you should ever email content to your audience that doesn't have a link in it asking for their feedback. And you send them to some kind of contact mechanism, or it goes immediately to a form where they can email you or something. But even if you're not promoting something, you should be conditioning that click to get them to click that and at least be asking for feedback, and you create that feedback loop. One way to guarantee you're going to get good feedback is to pretend like you don't know that your audience loves you and say shit like, just click this link. You can come over here and tell me if you thought this article was awesome or if you thought it was total bullshit and I'm a fraud and you hate me. Like, the people that like you in your audience are going to be like, no, I love you. And they're going to feel compelled to go and leave a good comment. You might get some good feedback, but also you're going to get comments that sound like awesome testimonials, which is great if that article is posted somewhere in public, because the people who don't know you who read those comments don't realize those comments are in response to a negative prompt. So it seems like all that praise is that person's own idea. So it looks like people love you maybe a little bit more hyperbolically than they actually do. That's a super sneaky trick. Shh. We
And
also
that's part of indoctrination, you think?
Yeah. It's definitely a little bit of indoctrination that happens when new people come in that are not actually inducted into part of the circle, and they see that third party confirmation. That third party idea is actually part of the indoctrination stuff we'll talk about in a second. So that'll come right back up. Um, we talked a little bit about that idea of belonging, and if even non-interactive content, like even magazines, people feel like they belong to some kind of group by being a subscriber to something as non-communicative and interactive as like a print magazine. If it's branded properly, where it feels like it's really tightly focused to them and their lifestyle and their tastes, it feels like they're part of a club just by being a consumer of that information. And we talked about major news networks before. They have that same self-personal identification that people have with their network as a brand. They feel like they belong to some kind of movement when really they're just people who like the same TV shows. You know what I mean? Like fans of Friends are not a movement. They're just people who like a comedy show. But for some reason, when people are talking about like a news channel, then they feel like, oh, you're doing meaningful stuff. No, you just like the same TV show as a bunch of other people. Um, and then also there's this sense of pride in the community. If it's a well-maintained community, I take pride in my community because I built a community that didn't exist that I wanted to be a part of. And anytime I'm making an administrative decision along those lines, it taps into that. It's like, am I thinking of this from my standpoint as the owner of a valuable community, or am I thinking of this from the standpoint of a member? And I always try to think of it from the standpoint of a member of a commercial community where we really like the guy who runs it and we want to make sure he can make a living. But you always want to think of it that way because that user experience is vitally important, right? Because that user experience is what gets people to participate. It's what gets them to have pride in the community. It's what gets them to feel loyal to it and not want to leave it. There's communities. In fact, I just thought of this literally the other day, and I hadn't done it yet because I was waiting because their website looks crappy on the iPad and I was going to check it out on my laptop on show day, which is today. It's a community I was part of literally like since 2001, and then I was really active around 2004. Not so much since I went into business for myself, like since 2009. Like I would check in like maybe once every few months, and then now I haven't been there since like 2010 or something. But I still feel like I need to go in. Like, are the same people posting there? Are they still the same? You know what I mean? Like, I'll go there and I bet I'll recognize usernames and avatars of people that are still part of that community. And I bet if I posted, a bunch of new people will be like, oh, what the hell is this guy? And then like a bunch of old people will show up and be like, that guy's awesome. He's like your grandpa as far as this forum is concerned. And I know the last few times I had gone there, which again were like years after I had not been there, some of the people that were just like regular forum jerks like me were like the admins now, schooling the newbies on like, we remember when that guy used to post there regularly and he's awesome. You should listen to him and not be a jerk. So I thought that was interesting that like I felt this tug of this community that I literally haven't been a part of. I haven't participated in what the community is about for like over a decade. Easily more than that. Might even be like 13, 14 years. But
Wow.
it's just people that I knew who were in this community that like you just kind of check in with them and then you still like sort of read about that community. And then, you know, I don't know. It's one of these things. Like it's specifically it's a gaming community for like old pen and pencil and paper games. And like they're still talking about like the game that was published in the 90s when I was in college. Like they still play that one even though like 2 subsequent versions have come out. You know, so it's just, I don't know. In one way it's weird that people would still be part of that community, but hey, like you don't judge people on their hobbies. Like it's not, as long as they're not neglecting anybody and they can survive, hey, you like whatever you want. If you like old pen and paper role-playing games, that's cool. I don't play them, but I'm still dorkily interested in. Like I said, I got so deeply involved in this community back then that like it still tugs at me every once in a while. I'll think of the website and be like, hey, I should go check that out. I'll go log in and see what they're up to. So anyway, if you can get people to be proud of being a member of that community and get them to participate, the tug from that community on them is very, very strong, is my point, as you can see.
Do you think people have that same similar tug in the cult of copy?
I like to think so. I mean, I'm trying to create the kind of thing where people are annoyed by their urge to check it out very frequently. If that makes sense.
Right.
You know what I mean? I want people to feel like I really want to check it out, but I know if I check it out, I'm going to be spending a long time there because a bunch of awesome stuff has been posted. That's kind of what I'm trying to create. Because like I said, I want the hardcore addicts. I want the people who can not only consume all of that, they can consume all of that, and I want more. And then I feel like that sets you up in such a way where the audience at large, potential clients, customers, future followers and things, like there's no competition to the fire hose that you're putting out. Like everyone else is just sort of like they're going to come to like other people will publish things that have to do with my topic, and people will come in the cult and post it and ask me about it. You know what I mean? Like what a great position to be in, to where like you're sort of setting the opinion, the popular opinion in the niche. And I'm not saying I do that. I don't want it to sound like I'm an egomaniac or anything, but that's how you know when your community is working for the people who are members of that community, when they are bringing things related to your community into the group to get the group's opinion. That means you've established a group where that hive mind, the input, the influence, the mind that people feel they are collectively part of when they're inside the group, that means they feel like it's smarter than they are. So they're going to come and get the group opinion when they want opinions on the topic that you're all mutually interested in. That's when you've created a community of value. When people aren't forming their own opinion, they want to know what the group thinks. That's awesome. That's a great kind of community build up. And you build it up by putting out high enough content, republishing high enough quality content, that the people coming into it see the value there. What you publish as the administrator of these communities that you're inducting people into, that's what sets the tone and the expectation. And what's worked for me, I'm not saying it as like a universal recommendation, I don't know what your niche is, but in my particular community, I felt like a lot of the people that were publishing content in the persuasion and copywriting fields were dumbing it down a lot for a beginner audience. So I shot for an intermediate audience and built my brand around that. Like, I don't want total beginners. I want people who kind of know what they're talking about and want to start scratching at the deeper level stuff. That's where I set myself up as a gatekeeper. Because like I said, I want higher priced products. I'm not trying to cast as wide a net as possible. I'm digging a deep well that I want good lifelong customers to get trapped in and be happy about, because it's a deep well.
Have you found? I was just thinking about it in my own community. When you reach out, one of the things that you bring up in your own content is about reaching out to influencers. So, do you think that's a way that where you're kind of getting two birds with one stone by inducting a high influential person into your community? You also sort of indoctrinate everybody else in the community because of that, and then you also have all of their followers coming in as well, like something similar.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said by when you're in a niche where there are a lot of people trying to be opinion makers. Instead of trying to compete with all the established opinion makers, set yourself up as a resource for the opinion makers. You know, because then they come in and participate in your group at a much higher level, and then there's interaction going on, and then all of a sudden you're at that strata with them, and then you can go down into the wider community. So again, like, I'm not saying this in a bragging way. My observation based on the way that people treat me and talk about me is that there are some people who see me as like a copywriter for internet sales of some repute, right? Like, I have a reputation for that. I speak at events. They announce me as a copywriter. Some people say legendary. I think that couldn't be possible because I really don't have that long of a career, but I've used these forces of induction and indoctrination to build a community around the topic So I didn't really have to work that long in the field as an expert to become sort of a curator for the niche that I wanted to serve. And writing is very stressful, especially on a deadline, especially when people paid you a buttload of money. Like, I've been paid for sales letters what established authors get paid for a novel. That's crazy. But yeah, but it's cool, but man, is it stressful. So the goal was to leverage that connection to authority and the successes I did have, because I did write successful sales letters. I just didn't do it for a very long time. Capitalize on that, leverage it into building a community around that topic, because I do have a discerning enough eye to select and create quality content, but I use the reputation to jumpstart that. Rather than have to prove to someone that I know what I'm talking about, I just went and wrote some successful sales letters, use those as instant credential builders, which is a good pivot, because now we're going to talk about indoctrination, which is about giving people these tricks, these little simple twists that make them consume information and internalize it automatically without you having to push. I see we only have 5 minutes left. We're only supposed to go an hour, but I don't got anything to do. You got to run, Zane?
Nope. The reason why I'm here is because I'm kind of one of your fans here, and I'm the guy who's like, no, 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 I want more. So please
Okay.
keep going.
Well, good. Well, man, that's crazy. Like, can you imagine if I'd actually done that first segment where we'd had a discussion? We'd have to split this episode in two. And I deliberately tried to make this one shorter. But that's my goal. I've been trying to make it looser and more conversational. So I guess I'm getting there because I'm rambling for longer and longer. So the second thing we're going to talk about is this indoctrination. Once you've brought people into this community that you've set up where they feel like they're a part of and it's valuable and they're proud to be there, this is where indoctrination happens. And I talked about how naturally on the internet these situations for indoctrination occur. They just happen because of the structure of these communities. Zane was just talking about how you can have experts that come into your community that are recognized experts in the field. Like, I have many much more famous, much more storied and legendary copywriters that are in my internet community for copywriters, which lends authority to the group, and then they actually participate now and again. So it's seen almost as an endorsement inside the group. Now, I could take that a step further if I wanted to and approach those guys and say, like, what would it take to endorse the cult of copy to your communities outside of here, since you're a member and you like it? Like, I would like to do something where we work together that, was mutual benefit. Now, who knows what that would be, but think about that in terms of what your own business is, right? Endorsers can be very, very powerful inside the group. And because of these people's status inside my community, when they're members inside my group, anything they talk about in a positive way is going to be of benefit, right? So, like, if someone asks, hey, what are the classic books of copywriting that I should look at? And hypothetically, John Carlton pops in and names his favorite copywriting books. Or Bond Halbert pops in and says which books his dad Gary liked. I hate to sound like I'm name dropping. I'm just trying to create an example here. If you're in copywriting, you know those names. That would be meaningful to you. But this weird effect happens where, like, they know they're in my group, so a lot of times, not because I make them or anything, but people will also mention me in that same strata because they're inside my group, and it's like a courtesy thing. So that's another way that endorsement can happen naturally and boost your profile, because I've noticed, like I said, I feel like the reputation I'm given vastly exceeds the skill and experience level I have for what it is that I used to do. I'm not going to argue with it when it happens, because I don't sell that. It's not like somebody could buy it from me and get an inferior product. It's just a reputation for something that I did kinda, but I correct people when they're drastically wrong, but I'll let them be as hyperbolic as they want about my supposed talent and skill at what it is that I did for a very brief period.
But I think that also feeds into the overall feel. Like when you say, well, I'm known as legendary, but only because I use these principles that actually work. And nobody, like a lot of people, in my opinion, look at it and say, well, they can't all be amazing. It can't all be perfect because then it's overhyped. So you kind of put it into check of just like, well, this is
Right.
how it's laid out and this is why, but it still works. So take away the good that you see from it.
Well, okay, so we talked about Gary Halbert a second ago, and if you don't know Gary Halbert, I think his website's garyhalbert.com, or if you just Google Gary Halbert, you'll find him. He is a late copywriter. He was billed as like the greatest living copywriter or whatever when he was alive, primarily because he told people that's what he was. He was brilliant self-promoter. His ads sold ridiculous amounts of stuff. He leveraged that to becoming a speaker and an expert and sort of like a father figure to a whole generation of copywriters, basically. The reason I mention him is because you're talking about this idea of legend. And a lot of people have this idea that legend is something that like time bestows upon you if you're worthy of it. And that used to be the case when the stories that people would repeat between each other that would survive the ages and get polished and become legendary, it used to have to be bestowed upon you either by will or by chance, because that had to happen. These communities actually had to talk about you on their own because you weren't in them. They were all over the place, right? But now with the internet, like, you control the community too. So like you can guide that narrative into existing. And the reason I tied that into Gary Halbert before is because he famously wrote this series of letters, which he packaged into a book called the Boron Letters. And these were when he, again, if I'm wrong in this, defer to the book, because I'm not saying this is like definitive. This is my memory from reading the book, but I believe he was serving a sentence for like advertising fraud in some degree, which he claims he was innocent of. You read the book, it's got the full details. But regardless, he was in Boron Penitentiary, and he wrote the letters while serving his sentence there, and the letters are written to Bond, who is his son. Now, he doesn't really sell anything in these letters directly, but what the genius of these letters are, and I recommend anyone who's a copywriting hopeful who's trying to do the kind of things I'm talking about, where you create a following around yourself and build a community that's loyal to your ideas. What these letters did is sold Gary the character. He created Gary Halbert, the legendary copywriting superstar, by the anecdotes he told in this story. Like, the version of it you can buy now, I think, has commentary by Bond, like the Kindle version, I think, is the one that he published. And it's really interesting because he tempers Gary telling the story about Gary the character with what Bond remembers of Gary the man. And that to me was very interesting, because that is how you get to actually see Gary's creative and marketing genius, of how he took things that were real but positioned them in a certain way so that it made him look almost superhuman. An example would be like the very first chapter. He talks about his running routine while in the prison. And I believe at the end of that chapter, Bond points out that his dad was not like a super healthy, fit dude. But if you read that chapter, you're like, Gary always did his road work in the morning. Because, like, Gary just spoke with this pomposity in his letters from his point of view. So you would think like that guy gets up in the morning, he's ready to do his road work, and he does his hour of hard grinding on the road to be fit. Apparently, Gary in real life didn't do that. But legendary Gary did. But the trick is, everyone remembers legendary Gary, even though Gary wrote the book. So it's like Beowulf. Beowulf is famous thousands and thousands of years after he died, because he did this legendary thing that was passed on as an oral history, and finally some poet asked the little locals about it and then wrote it down and made it all pretty and expanded it and probably exaggerated and stuff. Imagine if Beowulf was the one who wrote Beowulf. Like, we wouldn't know the difference. Wouldn't that be weird? But that's basically what Gary did. He wrote his own legend, and you can read it in the Boron Letters. And that was the part that's amazing to me, is even now when people talk about the legendary figure of Gary, they name things from that book, and you have to remind them, like, Gary wrote that book. Like, that's not
Yeah.
things that other people said about Gary. Those are things that Gary told you about Gary, which is
Well,
cool.
yeah.
Like I don't want to make it seem like I'm dissing, like that's fake. I'm like, that's brilliant. That's great that he did that. Um, so that's a thing you can do with that power of indoctrination, where uh, you get endorsers. We didn't even get past the first part of indoctrination. The second part of indoctrination is testimonials, which are like endorsements, but they're from like strangers no one recognizes. So you have people come into this community, and if you've got products in there that people are talking about, or things that you're saying, just like I post content and people respond to that content, people who have been followers of mine for a long time that like my work and get value from it will come in and give a comment that is essentially a testimonial about how good I am at what I do. And then someone else who comes into the group that doesn't recognize that person, these comments by strangers have that same amplifying effect as an endorsement would, even though they're from someone they don't know, because they think, like, what is this person's motivation for saying that? There's no compensation for making that kind of comment. It's just freely given, and therefore it must be true, and they accept it without skepticism or criticism or even thinking twice about it. It just comes right past the barrier and gets accepted as another person's honest opinion of the quality of my work, as an example. So when that happens, it has that persuasive effect, you know? Like there's just no way to resist it, because you're not putting up a defense. If I was saying how awesome I was, people would put their walls up. I have a vested interest in how awesome people think I am. But when other people say it, for some reason that wall of defense comes down, which is funny because they're saying it inside a community that I built, which is cool.
Yeah.
What you got on the
Now,
screen there?
yeah, we do have a question from Sean, and I think it's very fitting, especially as we've given context to everything here. But it says he came in a little late, and hopefully that he's not asking something that isn't already covered. But how do you indoctrinate with information without giving away too much?
Well, the idea with indoctrination is it's not really about the content of the information, it's the way in which it's presented. So I could give you a statement about the quality of my sales letter template as a product, and it could come from me. That would be me trying to give you information directly. That's not indoctrination, because you would be skeptical of it. Of course I think it's great, it's my product. But if someone else in the group posted, like it happened recently, I think it was JP Bailey posted of a sales letter. It's the first sales letter she had that she wrote herself without hiring someone else to do. She used my template and got a result. Is it like the best result any salesperson ever got by hiring an expensive copywriter? No. But like, it's better than she ever got writing her own sales copy. That's all. That's good enough for me, man. Like, that's what I wrote it for. So she posts that. Someone else reads that. That's indoctrination, because it didn't come from me. They accept the reality of the quality and the abilities inherent in my sales letter template because it came from another person that had no reason to come into the community and share that with everyone. But I created the community environment where that was possible. She didn't have to go post it on her own website or on Yelp or something. Of course she came and posted it in the community, because when she asked me, she told me about her success privately, I was like, great job. I would love for you to post a comment about it in the cult. And she did. Which, like, I didn't tell her what to put in it. What she was saying was being honest, but I created an environment where my biggest fans are in the group where she's sharing that information. How could it not have an indoctrinating effect? Much better than if I would have shared it. But if that community didn't exist, I would have to at least be quoting her. Whereas in the community, she can come in and say it herself. And it was unbidden in that she didn't have to come back and give me that feedback, but also she may not have posted it in the community that way if I didn't encourage her to do so. And I encouraged her to do so because I get the benefit of that that basic endorsement of the quality of my work being in the context of a testimonial inside the group from her own words, posted by her, it's undeniable. They will automatically consume her opinion of my product as fact. Hopefully that answers the question.
Well said.
Another factor of indoctrination, when information is being shared inside of a community and is not being opposed or argued with or rejected, the size of that community is influential to the members. So that's a little bit of induction, because the more people you induct, the bigger the group gets. The size of the audience matters to the number of people in the audience in varying ways. It certainly matters to outside advertisers, how big your audience is. But even just when something is posted in the group and no one argues with you about it, the size of the group means that many people implicitly agree with whatever it is that you're posting. It's almost like they're vouching for it by not arguing when clearly the audience is of a certain size. Now, you may notice, if you have been a long-time member of the group, that I try to be as open to differing opinions as possible, but if someone insists on repeatedly stressing an opinion that is counter to something that I not only believe personally, but may have an effect on my business, for example, I boot that person, because I'm controlling the narrative inside my own group, right? Like, I am under no obligation to create a democratic and open group. Like, my loyalty is to the quality of the group, but I won't let someone, well, to give you an example so it doesn't sound super weird, there was some guy in the group, I won't name him, but he did end up getting banned, where, oh, thank you, Sean. Sean says, hope you have a happy, healthy baby. Surely, thank you for the answer. For those listening in the audio version. I had a guy in the group that every time he would make a comment, he would make a stab at something like, but then again, I don't write using templates. Which is fine if you have that opinion, but like, it's my group and the products I sell are copywriting templates. I use them professionally. I have many happy clients. All of my clients who have bought it from me are happy with it. Like, I don't want to have to be monitoring the group constantly to counter that guy every time he's going to take what I feel is an unnecessary dig at the concept of writing with templates. Like, I get if he, as a writer, is proud of his ability to write a super creative 100% unique letter every time. I'm not that good. I used a template. It worked very well for my clients. Everybody was happy. Therefore, there should be no problem with that. But like, he was adamant about it, and it was the kind of thing where I was like, if you can't stop saying that, you should go. And I can't remember if I booted him or he voluntarily left, but either way, that's the kind of thing where to clarify, that's me doing some indoctrination control. Because again, what he says as a member of the community, if it goes unchallenged, becomes accepted, because I created an environment where indoctrination can happen. So when you create a group, be aware that indoctrination happens no matter what, and that's why you have to rule your communities with an iron fist. And if you've seen me ever talk about leading a community, you have to be merciless. Like, do not let the monkeys rule the monkey house. Like, you have to be the boss in very strict ways. Like, I had another guy recently that I felt was being rude, and I told him that, like, other people in the community feel like you're being rude. Can you knock it off? If you can't, I'll help you leave. And he was like, blah, 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 you don't censor me, blah, kick me out if you have to. And I said, okay, because, like, I can't threaten to kick you out and set up parameters and allow you to violate them in front of the group. I can't. Like it's one of those things where, like, it's out of my hands if I tell you what needs to happen and you defy that. Like, I no longer have a choice because I have to do what I said I would do. But in that case, I do try not to censor people. I really do. But at the same time, like, if I go to your page and tell you what to post, then I'm censoring you. If I do it inside my own group, like, I'm just asking politely for you to adhere to my wishes for my community. And if you won't, go post whatever you want on your own page. But I'm in control of what gets published inside my own group, because I'm aware of that indoctrinating effect. And again, anything that is not what you want to be said in the group, I know it sounds super creepy because it's cult control stuff, but you need to eliminate it, because if you let it stand unchallenged, it will have that indoctrinating effect, because people are like, well, nobody's arguing with it. That's why spam can be so dangerous in these groups, because if you're not on top of it, eliminating the spam, the audience might think you are allowing it by not crushing it. And what's funny enough is that's how like trademark law works in the United States. Like if you have a trademark and someone starts like copying your logo or doing some shit and you find out, if you don't try to crush them legally, that can act against you in court. Like you have to actively defend your trademarks and copyrights, or else the other person can assume you're abandoning them, which seems kind of hokey, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, I really like your statement in your about section of the group. In fact, I use it pretty much word for word, which is spammers will be banned and mocked, and also, which I also the other thing I really liked was that spam isn't defined by what you think it is. It's by what we say it is. So worst case scenario, just ask, and it's always the spammers that don't ask who are going to be spammers. So
sure. And when I say mocked, one thing I do is when I ban someone for spamming, I private message them with a screenshot of their spam and tell them that I've banned them for spamming. And then sometimes they'll argue with me that it's not spam. And a lot of times they get really upset because right before I ban them, I'll usually leave a very, very vulgar comment. And in fact, this is a funny story, because I guess the dude spammed a bunch of groups at once and happened to get banned right as he was getting interesting, but he posted spam to the group, and I don't know if you need to flag this later as being adult language, but the comment that I left, and I always leave a very vulgar comment, because what it is I use the Facebook app on the iPad, but you can't ban people easily from that interface. Like from the Facebook actual web page, you can just click on the post and delete and ban at the same time. Whereas on the Facebook app, you would have to delete the post, go look the member up by name, then ban them. So I always have to open up the browser and then tell it to go be the regular browser, not the mobile version, and then go to the cult and then look it up and then ban them. So I always, like, from the Facebook app, leave a vulgar comment, and it only sits there the amount of time it takes for me to get to the Facebook webpage. But what I told them was, you can go take a big old suck on the devil's pecker, fat boy. And before I could get over to the web page, he was like, I could see the pop-ups of him commenting, and he was like, 190 pounds, all muscle, bro. And I'm like, the part where I told you were fat in that was the part that bothered you? Not where I told you could go to hell and suck the devil's dick? That part was cool, but I'm not fat. Whatever. Anyways, what happened was he must have spammed that same spam to multiple groups, because before I could get to the web page to delete it, the whole post was gone, and he was like blocked. Like, I didn't block him, but he was vanished from Facebook. So I was like, Facebook must have terminated that dude with like extreme prejudice. And I was upset because like so few spammers are actually real people that you can mess with. I was so excited to mock that guy, because I've conditioned the group to know what spam is spam, and they usually mercilessly make fun of spammers for me until I can get there and delete it. So that's why that control is important, so that the community knows what's acceptable and what's not. And one of the things I've done as a tip to help implement that is that, like you said in my about, I tell people if they're not sure if something's okay to ask. When they ask, my condition for them posting is, you have to say in there that you asked permission and I gave it. So that sort of conditions people to ask. And then when someone posts something that looks shitty, sometimes a member will comment and say, this looks weird. Did you ask permission to post this? And if they say no or argue or whatever, like, the community knows it doesn't look right, and if they got permission, they would get to say they got permission. What else do we have? Case studies happen in real time. I sort of mentioned one when I was talking about testimonials. That one actually went well. Normally a testimonial would just be like, I used Colin's templates and they were awesome for me. in a comment, right? That would be a testimonial. What J.P. Bailey did was a full-on case study because she linked to a letter. She talked about the results. She gave all of this like third-party verifiable stuff. You know, like you could go actually look at her sales letter. You could go look at the comment threads of people saying how much they liked her product and that it got them to buy. In fact, she even posted an update in the group to say someone had messaged her to say, I can tell you use Colin's sales letter template, but the letter was so good I bought it anyway. I was like, that's like a double endorsement for you as a good writer and me as a template maker. Like, we both get credit. Win-win.
Nice. High five.
But that is a demonstration of a case study where, like, I didn't put that together. It just occurred naturally inside the group. Or we've talked before on the show about the sales that I've had about the monkey painting and then the broken skateboard. Those occurred at, like, people saw the responses and they saw my update of the story happen in real time inside the group. It's a case study being demonstrated in real time. That gets accepted as just a thing that happened. It's not a story I told you. It's not a post they read on my blog months after it allegedly occurred. Like, they saw it happen. They saw it literally really happen, especially if they're on my timeline and in the cult. Because on the timeline, they saw me, like, on Sunday say, I should get a skateboard. And then on Monday, I posted a picture of a broken skateboard. And it's one of those things where, again, you could not do that kind of marketing with that indoctrination level if you didn't have a community that you inducted people into as part of it. You know what I mean? That story is funny inside the context of my community, that these people, like, know me and, like, we're hanging out on my back porch now. It's happening right now. Like I used to film this show from my office, and then my neighbor moved out, and I couldn't mooch his internet anymore, and my wife's super pregnant, so I didn't get new internet set up. So now we do the show from my house, but, like, we're in my house. Like, like, the camera is specifically in a spot where we're, like, sitting and having a chat. I'm in a chair. You're on the same level as me. I did that on purpose to make it feel like that's the kind of conversation we're having, because I am inducting you into my circle. I learned that from Mr. Rogers, by the way. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He didn't start the show in his sweater and his sneakers. He came in a suit and business shoes, and then he changed into his sneakers and his sweater. And if you notice, the camera changes, and he's almost always sitting when he's talking to the kids at home, but the camera is on his level looking into his eyes like a child would be standing up looking into his eyes at that level. They did that deliberately to frame the show as being shot from the point of view of the toddlers that he was talking to, because he was trying to indoctrinate them, and like totally for good reasons. But he wanted that information. He wanted to induct them into the circle, make them feel safe, make them feel comfortable. And what's funny is that Mr. Rogers effect of taking off your coat and making yourself comfortable. I've seen David Ogilvy, the famous copywriter, do that in a presentation where he does this talk, and he says he's in India and it's very hot, so he hopes he doesn't mind if you take his coat off. And he takes his coat off and hangs it on the back of the chair and rolls up his sleeves. And you can tell that this footage is old enough to where that must have been shot on, like, film, meaning like you would think they would have scripted that out before they start rolling camera. But it was important to him, a dude who cared that much about the message and the image. He did that on camera on purpose because he wanted you to see it, because it made you feel comfortable, like he was talking to you like an equal, not in his business suit. He got comfortable the same way you would talk to your buddy at lunchtime, and that was important.
Now, actually, to that end, your camera at your office is set up to be at eye level like that. But now that I'm looking at it and looking at your laptop, maybe next time it should be raised up a little bit, because right now the camera is tilted upwards, so you're actually getting that. Well, like, as far as the audience view goes, it looks like you're kind of looking down at them. As, you know,
it's a little too dominating.
I did the research. It was actually an interesting data point about that.
What's funny though is webcams have a different kind of feel. Like, if it's a for real camera, it has that effect. But a webcam in particular has a certain look that's accepted and feels more intimate and comfortable.
Oh, I never
But
thought of it like that.
normally,
Yeah.
you would be right. If it was like a for real camera shot that could see more of my body, but that close up, like I'm obviously a
Okay.
webcam, has a certain. I mean, obviously, your audience has to be web savvy enough to understand and have seen plenty of web pictures.
Hmm.
But like, if it looks like in your face webcam, that has a certain read, and
Hmm.
that's why I'm kind of okay with it.
No, I
But
can see that.
I knew I wanted a professional camera, and I was very careful about where I placed it in the office before, for that reason that you're talking about. The last step of indoctrination, we're coming up on the end here. I promise we won't go for 2 hours. It'll just be an hour and a half, basically. The last one is it's sort of like having case studies, but you get to see before and after occur in real time, which is good if you're good at making plans and actually executing them. I'm not great at it, so a lot of times when you'll see me tease something in the cult, if it actually happens within a reasonable amount of time, that means I was smart enough to uh, not tease it until it was well enough developed that I knew it was going to happen. Other times I tease things so far ahead of time that I end up changing plans completely. But when you can create that before and after effect in front of your audience by asking things and then delivering on the thing that you asked, or setting up an event and then the event occurs, creating these before and afters where things evolve and develop and grow over time. For example, promoting this show inside the cult of copy hopefully has this cumulative effect of building up an audience over time and becoming just an accepted, well-consumed part of the cult of copy experience, is because I keep posting about it in the group over time as new episodes happen. So it demonstrates that it's going to occur week after week. It demonstrates that it's on a regular schedule. People comment on it every time. It starts to build up momentum. It starts to snowball. And that before and after effect, oh, I remember when like it was episode 0 and you'd never done a show before, but I've seen every episode since. That kind of thing matters to people. Like they talk about the newsletter in the same way. I've been a subscriber since day one. I have the lowest subscription rate ever because you've only raised the price. That before and after effect can become very powerful in guiding not only people's opinions but people's behavior through indoctrination. So like one of the examples is when I do a live training inside the group, I charge a certain amount, and then when the live event actually happens, the price goes up. Because I always tell people when it's live and it hasn't happened yet, you buy a live ticket, you'll get the recording too, but that's the cheapest it's ever going to be. The price is only going to go up. I do that because as like a business owner, I want the spike, like I'm having a launch. I want the sales spike of the maximum number of people buying it then, and then the rest of the people buying the recording are just extra, just bonuses, right? I want to create a big splash at one moment, so I use that as a stressor, as a point to make. Well, what happens as the before and after, the audience actually gets to see that really happen when I say it's going to happen. I really do have the lowest price ever when it's live, and then I do raise the price. So the next time I offer one, if I was smart enough to offer them frequently enough to accommodate for the growth of the group, they would see that happening in real time and know that the next time I say, buy it now while it's still live before the recording price goes up, they know that I really mean it because they see the before and after happen. It doesn't feel like a thing that I'm pushing on them as a marketing ploy. They accept it as apparent reality because they saw it happen, which again acts as indoctrination. They don't question it when I say it anymore. But the only way that demonstration could possibly have happened is because I did it inside of the cult.
Awesome. Now, true to form, more of the questions are showing up towards the end.
Nice.
So
Well, that was the last point, so let's do Q&A now before we wrap up the show. Perfect.
awesome. So here's a perfect cue for an A.
Mm-hmm.
And he's Carlos is asking, can you sum up the steps one more time before you say bye-bye?
Man, I wonder which steps he means. Which thing did I say that had steps?
It's a very good question.
Well, we talked about induction, and we talked about indoctrination. And it wasn't really steps. We just talked about different ways in each. And I can go through the list again for the whole episode. Under the concept of induction, we talked about how that is about bringing them into a trusted inner circle. We talked about how that can be for communities the way that mine is, like a Google group. A Facebook group, but it can also be even just with a newsletter list. We talked about how that conversational feedback loop is important, where you're constantly asking the audience to give you feedback, and that makes them feel like inducted as part of a community because you're listening and responding. Even if you don't listen and respond directly to them, like I'm doing to you, Carlos, the rest of the people watching at home, even listening to this recording much longer in the future, realize that that's something I do. So it adds value to me as a personality, that I can go back and forth, and that there's engagement that other shows and other resources for this information may not have. We talked about the sense of belonging, how to get people to feel like they're actually part of a community, take pride in participating and being a part of that community. They're proud to be part of it. They care about what happens in it to the point that they will defend it against invasion by outsiders. Then under indoctrination, we talked about endorsers, which are heavy hitters in your niche that happen to be part of your community that participate. We talked about testimonials, which are just the average regular people in your community who happen to talk about your stuff in front of each other. We talked about the herd size itself, the size of the crowd that is gathered around you, if it's self-apparent, has its own effect in indoctrinating people, because they feel like if it's that big of a group and everyone is accepting it, it must be true. And we talked about the counterpoint of how that's dangerous, that if something that is not okay with you, you have to crush it as fast as possible, because if you don't, the audience assumes it's okay and should be there. And that's one of the reasons you see large communities fail, if they don't crush spam and encourage the crushing of spam, because spam posts start to get thought of as being allowed. But as you grow, of course, you're going to get more and more spam. So you need to constantly be vigilant and crush it, or at least do a lot to make the community realize what's acceptable and what's not, and how to identify it. And I've done that through making sure when people post things they've gotten permission, I tell them to say that you got permission. I actually only ever busted one person for posting something that said they got permission from me and they didn't. Like, I thought it was awesome that he was smart enough to realize that that was a hallmark of acceptance, but dumb enough to not realize that I'm constantly vigilant. So it was like, you're a little bit smart and a little bit stupid at the same time.
Right, and by crushing it, you mean like, like crush, like suppress, not like the internet marketing term of like, go do it, crush it.
Yeah, no, I crushed him. For those listening in the audio version, I just made Darth Vader fist. We also talked about case studies, which is when people talk about their results using things that I've recommended right inside the group. And we talked about the before and after effect, where you can make promises inside the group and then make them come true later. So later on, when you make a promise about something that's imminent to happen, they're more likely to believe you because they've seen it happen directly in front of them. There's before and after. You've set up a causality chain and a sequence of consequences for things. And again, none of these indoctrination measures would be available to you if you're just broadcasting messages out to the public via a blog or whatever. It only occurs when you create a community that people feel like they're a part of, that you can do these things like internal case studies, and where they can see the herd size have an effect on them, and this before and after effect exists. When you do it outside of an inducted community, it feels very artificial, like you're pushing it on them. When you do it inside of a community, it seems self-apparent and natural, but still has that persuasive effect of indoctrinating because they accept it as reality. They saw it happen. You demonstrate it in front of them. Now the thing is, like, a lot of people are like they think indoctrination is negative because like I'm artificially cramming information into people's brains without them being able to resist it, right? Like, I'm not giving them anything bad. I just don't want to take the effort to be like, here's why you should listen to me every single time. Like, sometimes I just want to say something that's true and not have to spend the energy to convince you because it's true. So I just want you to listen the one time and just be like, okay, that's true. You know what I mean? Like, people have this naturally heightened sense of skepticism and resistance, and I don't want to have to fight with that every time. Like, if I was lying, it would also be useful to be able to indoctrinate people, and unfortunately, I can't help what someone's intent might be. But my intent is, I don't want to have to convince you I'm honest every single time, because I am honest. I would rather just be able to get to what it is that I wanted to talk to you about. So I try to induct people into a circle of trust and then indoctrinate them, use formats of information that are self-indoctrinating so that, like, it just seems apparent and people think it's a good idea to buy my stuff without me having to push hard, which is why I think the merchandising product side of the Cult of Copy has been as successful as it is inside the group, but it doesn't feel like I advertise or push constantly, is because I make it easy to buy things inside the group, and the cult is self-indoctrinating. Like, people just like the stuff and they talk about it amongst themselves. That makes more people want to buy it, but it's not sneaky. They really do like it. All I've done is provide the opportunity for them to talk about it in front of each other, which is beneficial to me, because all they got to do whenever somebody says they like a thing of mine that they bought is the post right at the top of the page makes it easy to buy because of the way I've set up the group.
Yeah.
That's all I got to talk about today. We got any more questions?
Yeah, well, actually, Carlos came back with and
Okay.
said, I got it. Thanks so much. And more to the point of the induction and indoctrination, we touched on it a little bit. He even goes on and says, "Sorry, I arrived a little bit late," even though it's going to be recorded and it's no big deal, and you can
Right.
show up live or not. He actually felt that pull, that draw that you talk about, of like, sorry I was late, and I'm sorry
Right.
that I'm asking these questions. So I thought that was pretty cool how it kind of came together in that example.
Yeah, it's very powerful. And again, it's one of those things where I don't want to tell people like, oh, this is the way to build an internet business. It's just the way I've done it, and I find it to be very easy because I've grown up sort of since, like, this. My senior year in high school was the first year I got on the internet, and I don't even know what I used to do for fun before then. I love it. I grew up on it. Every job that I've had since then, I've tried to pursue jobs where I could waste as much time as possible on the clock on the internet. I built a business around doing that full time. If that's you, this is the kind of thing you should be interested in. If you're the kind of person that just wants the reach the internet can give you and you're not an internet person, this type of stuff can be simulated by you if you hire people to run it for you. It's still very valuable to do because it creates things for people who love the internet to latch onto, which means if they also love whatever your topic happens to be, as well as loving the internet, you're basically mobilizing them as your internet agents because they love your topic, but also understand how the internet works and are using it constantly. So those are the best people to engage with your internet properties because they become like brand ambassadors for you. They're the ones who spread the word around about what you do because you're not trying to hit everybody. You're hitting the people specifically who super love your topic and who are super engaged on the internet to consume it, as much of it as you're willing to create for them. And then you mobilize them, which they're happy to do because you've given them a community that they feel like they are a part of. And the way that I keep that clean and don't feel too dirty about it is because I created a community I wanted to be a part of. I'm like my own biggest fan as far as what the group is about because there was no group talking about the stuff that I wanted to talk about, so I made it, and that's why I care about the quality of the group so much, is because I want to read it every day, all day. And if it ever gets boring or crappy to me, I can only presume it's boring and crappy to other people, so I'm fiercely protective of what the experience is like being a member of that group, because I am one.
Right. Now we've got this comment that you see right now, and then one more from Jay Poole in the Cult of Copy. But this comment from Carlos, I'm actually kind of curious about it because I have seen this book, but it sounds by the way he said he got "Trust me, I'm lying because of you. Can't wait to read your book." Ryan Holiday is the guy who did this. I'm not sure.
Right.
I've heard of it
I
and seen
got
the
the
video.
book. I got the book, and I'm not super deep into it. Like I said, it's one of those books that I got because when I'm tired, I'm not very creative. So I try to feed my brain. So I got a book on deck to read with all the baby stuff I have going on. I'm
Hmm.
getting ready for that and just kind of sitting around, not doing anything for long stretches of time, being too tired to actually start anything. Started reading this book. It had been recommended to me by both Brad Goss and Adam Nolan and a couple of other people. I'd already owned the copy because the cover looked interesting. But basically, Ryan Holiday was a media manipulator, and I haven't gotten into the meat of the book. The stories are very interesting. My only criticism of the book is that because of who I am and what I'm interested in, I'm less impressed by the story bits and I want to get to the practical bits faster. But if you're not super familiar with like internet marketing and the way media properties interconnect, you probably find those stories more interesting than I would. And I will say, if I had read the book when I was younger, I might have liked it more, which I think is one of the reasons that I didn't like 4 Hour Work Week so much. It's because I'm older than Tim Ferriss, I think. But it
Yeah.
felt like a book written by a younger person, and I'm just at that age where I'm like, that's stupid. You know what I mean? Like just because I can tell it's like a younger attitude, like I can't stand people who are like in their early 20s or late teenage years right now, like just listening to them talk. It's like, oh, you're so stupid. But like I also am aware that like this is how all people feel as they get older, but maybe unlike other people who feel that way, I also simultaneously realize that I was exactly like that at that age. So in a way, I'm mad at myself, but also grateful like nothing terrible happened based on my bad decisions. You know, like I was
Right.
lucky in that regard.
Dodge a
But
bullet.
yeah, that so far is my only criticism. But when he talks about the actual techniques, that's really good. And what I really like is for people that aren't aware how easy it is to manufacture the kind of stuff that I talk about on this show. Like they feel like, oh, well, that's just like mumbo jumbo. Like it can't actually be that easy to practically apply. It really is. Like it really, really is. Like the opening chapter of the book, like you could still buy it. I'm not giving away much that you wouldn't get in the first 10 pages. He talks about having been hired to do public relations for the movie of Tucker Max's I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. Haven't seen the movie, haven't read the book. I know who Tucker Max is, and I know that like he's controversial, seen as an asshole. That's kind of his shtick. Well, what they did as part of the media campaign, Ryan Holiday talks about it's him and his girlfriend's the getaway driver, and he's defacing the billboards promoting Tucker Max's movie, which he designed and paid for,
Huh.
because that's part of the campaign. Is that the people hate Tucker Max so much they're defacing his billboards for his movie. Therefore, it's so controversial. You should go see it.
Uh,
And that story of the like, no, who's gonna write a news story about a billboard? But a billboard from like an infamous jerk that's getting defaced
right.
in a way that's like, you know, we hate Tucker Max. You know what I mean? Like in a mysterious, intriguing way. So basically, Ryan Holiday got the movie advertisements for that movie to be written up as if it was news. But that was
Nice.
his plan the whole time. So that's the
Mm.
kind. If that kind of thing interests you, read the book. Also of note, if that kind of thing interests you, I don't know if it's still free on Netflix streaming. I say free, like you pay a monthly membership, but it
Right.
might be on Netflix streaming. I say free because like I just pay every month and I watch as many movies as I want. Um, they should pay me for that endorsement,
Right. Yeah, I was just gonna
by
say that.
the way. The movie is Exit Through the Gift Shop, which is a movie by
Oh.
and about the graffiti artist Banksy,
Huh.
who it's very interesting because it's about how he tricked the art establishment into thinking that his street art was high art. And then, as part of the plot of the movie, he picks a random non artist and turns him into an art superstar for street art the exact same way, artificially, through manipulation in the movie. Kind of. It's hard to explain. It's one of those where you're like, is this real or is this part fake? You know, you
Huh.
can't tell. But you should definitely watch it. That's highly recommended. But it's along the same lines. If you like my description of that one chapter of the Ryan Holiday book and you like that kind of thing, that should appeal to you also. But I'm still reading the Ryan Holiday book. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying if it was me, if it had been written for exactly me, it would be less anecdotal and more practical. But I understand it's like his memoir, so I can see why it's not that way.
Right. I noticed for me, the whole concept of what he talks about, the practical application, I got excited about through video and went, oh, that's really
Hmm.
cool. But I first saw, like, it was one of the first trailers of a book I had ever seen.
Right?
Aside from the book that Stephen King wrote called Just After Dark, he created actually a motion comic series of little
Okay.
2-minute clips called N, and it's basically one of the stories in the book, and that was the only like really big like wow, like I didn't know that they did like trailers for books, but
Right.
like someone like Stephen King, but Ryan Holiday actually did what he already did and manufactured that, and it's just like a minute and 18 seconds of just a trailer, but everything that comes together,
Yeah.
it's a really cool visual
Yeah.
representation,
And
right?
again,
So,
that's the kind of thing that people don't think about and realize that the internet can do that other media can't. Like, very rarely will you see a commercial on TV for a book. Like, it
yeah.
has to be already an outrageous bestseller before they're putting a commercial out. In fact, I guarantee you, any commercial you see on TV for a book, the book is a bestseller already. Like, they will say that as
Huh.
a selling feature of the book in the TV commercial.
Hmm.
Or it might be the new book by a best-selling author. But that's the only time they're going to put the money behind it to do that. But on the internet, it's not that hard to put a video together, a promotional video, and Amazon is already on the internet. So, like, even more so than TV, you don't even have to remember the author's name or the title of the book because the video can click right to where you can buy it. Like, you are one step away from paying for it and having it mailed to your house or downloaded to your Kindle or whatever. That's like, what's the cost of that? Like zero to put up the video, not that much to make the video. Like, presumably you already wrote the book already, but it's not hard to do that. And if you make a good one, cleverness is as expensive as your brain is, I
Hmm.
guess. You know what I mean? Like, if you can come up with a clever idea to promote your book and get it in front of the right audience, that can be very, very effective in a way that like traditional media doesn't quite understand yet. But think of how much easier it would be to make that book sell when you make your trailer if you already have a community built around the topic. So, for example, if you were writing a vampire erotica thriller set during the Civil War, not that I am, I'm just pulling that off the top of my head, you might be in a group for like fans of vampire fiction, right? You
Right.
might even make that community. You might be a big fan and share all kind of stuff in there. And then, guess what, guys? I'm finally writing my own book. It's set in the Civil War about two star-crossed vampire lovers or something, whatever. But it's a lot easier to do that and build up interest if you've already built a community. So one of the most valuable assets you can build online for the purpose of making money is your own online community that you induct people into. And then once they're inducted into it, because of the way communities work, if you drive it especially, they'll start indoctrinating people with how awesome your stuff is. And it becomes a self-perpetuating community that continuously markets your own stuff that you can be a member of. And like, no one feels weird about it, doesn't feel pushy. As obnoxious as it sounds when I'm literally on the show explaining the mechanics of the cult of copy to the cult of copy, no one minds, even in that context. So imagine how it is like if you're not in a marketing context and you're just doing this stuff in a totally natural, transparent way. It's fine, and it's so much easier. Like, if you hate advertising, like writing salesy material, this kind of thing is so much easier because
Mm.
you're just conversing with people who are interested in what you're interested in to begin with. So,
Yeah, I can't wait for the erotic fanfic that you're about to write. I would say
right?
something along the lines of just Nosferatu of us or something like
Yeah, I get bored after 55 words. So,
that. All right. Well, there was like this one last little comment, and I can't quite figure out where to inject it in because it fits pretty much everywhere.
Right.
But Jay Poole did say, like, with the whole induction and indoctrination about, it's a bit like network marketing, if you will, Colin. 'Cause, we all know how
That's
you
why,
feel about
yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, like network marketing, multi-level marketing, pyramid schemes, all of that kind of stuff do use these, and that would be almost like the perfect negative example of what these tactics can be used to extract money out
Yeah.
of people. And it uses those forces of indoctrination in order to trick people into buying into it, and that's how it propagates. The problem with those exchanges is that the reason people are buying things is a lie, and typically the justification that they're given for buying those things is a lie. So, like in my community, I do indoctrinate people once they're inducted into the group. But when you buy things from me, you're buying that actual product to do whatever it is that that product says. So if you buy my sales letter template, it's because you want to write a sales letter. Whereas in a multi-level marketing program, what you're buying is paying to be a member so that you can promote stuff, and then you're buying stock of whatever it is, usually ahead of time, stick in your garage to sell to your future customers, which should be lining up any minute now. But really, in a scenario like that, you're the customer. They couldn't figure out how to sell it to customers, so they sell it to people as an opportunity, quote unquote. And that's how those schemes work. But they really do use those same forces, which is why they're so insidious. But the underlying point of the cult of copy is like, why do we let the bad guys get all the benefit of those methodologies when if you just harness it to something good and valuable, it is fine, right? Like no one is mad when they're in a natural, organic community that exists in this exact same environment. So what's wrong with creating one deliberately, as long as you have everyone's best interests in mind? As long as you're not like conspiring to leave people worse off than you found them, there's nothing wrong with using the same methods that evil people use.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the biggest reasons why I've always been, such a fan of the group and the show is just that it is what it is. The intent is the real motivator.
Yeah, and well, it's funny because we talked about how I didn't work as a copywriter for very long, and I think many of the people publishing information about persuasive writing have a vested interest in protecting their the perception of ethicality and being trustworthy. So they publicly reject anything that is perceived as the dark side of persuasion because they have customers that they need to keep happy and they need prospects that they need to attract. I gave up on that part of the business so I can say things without worrying about scaring people away or making my current clients upset because I don't have any who I'm writing for. So I feel like I got enough of it to have the experience to lend the authority that I do know what I'm talking about, but also I can be more free in what I say because I don't have a reputation to protect in that way that they might. But because of that, I'm one of the few people who actually is saying the kind of stuff that I say to talk about the darker side of persuasion the way that I do, because I don't mind if I weird people out, because the audience, like I said, the audience I'm going after is the hardcore audience. So like if I weird out someone by saying, here's 50 ways to trick people into buying things from you, if that weirds you out and you think it's like disgusting that I think tricking people is okay, then I'm not for you. But if you're like, I'm intrigued, can I use this for good? You'll dig deeper and you'll find out that that's what I recommend to everyone, because really the useful, magical, super powerful stuff is the stuff that good guys are scared to use because it's so powerful, which means only the bad guys use it. So, like people are like, oh, these con artists, they must have these magical powers to be able to trick otherwise smart people into falling prey to their schemes. Like, they're not. Like, they're criminals. Like, if they were smart, they would just be, like, legit business people, but they're morons. That's what the trick is with these skills, is that they're not magical powers. You don't have to be a genius to use them. They're actually really dumb It's just most people are like taught that they're taboo and they should be avoided, so they never learn about them. And that makes them weak against them. They can't defend against them, and it also makes them less effective because they somehow think it's rude to be deliberately persuasive, even if you have someone's best interest in mind. But
Cool.
it is what it is. Anyways, that's the end of the show. We got any more questions?
Nope. That was it. We're at a good
Awesome.
point. To
We
go
did
ahead and
end
wrap
up doing 2 hours, longest show ever. But thank you everyone for coming. Because I don't know, I might miss next Thursday's show if I have a baby. Who knows? But we're going to keep it going. I'm going to do my best to not miss the schedule, which is the Cult of Copy show records new episodes live Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. The recordings are available at the same URL. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/cultofcopy. You can see all previous episodes. This is episode 9. At some point in the future, you may already be listening to this episode as an audio-only version, which is available on iTunes and hopefully Stitcher for Android, and maybe even a couple of other places. Whichever place you are consuming this content, if you like it, click the subscribe button. That's probably somewhere on the page, no matter where it is you're listening to it, because we record new episodes every week. If you're interested in this kind of stuff beyond the show and want to discuss it and participate, maybe you have some copy you want to get looked at, maybe you want to read more about the darker arts of persuasion, I ask you to join the Cult of Copy. If you're interested, you can do that at cultofcopy.com. At the time of this recording, that points directly to the Facebook group, which if you request to join, I will likely approve you unless your Facebook profile looks super spammy. We'd love to have you as part of the community if any of this appealed to you. What else? I think that's it. I've been your host, the Reverend Dr. Sir Colin D. Terrio, Pontifex Maximus. I love that title, but it won't fit after all the other titles. But I am the leader, founder, and biggest fan of the Cult of Copy. I am your host, along with my director, Zane Miller of G-Tron. What's your group? G-Tron?
G-Tron Marketing, totally playing off of Voltron.
Nice, nice. G-Tron Marketing on Google+, and cultofcopy.com will take you straight to our group. That's it for this week. We'll see you next week. Thanks again for coming.